What's up? Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. Now I may or may not be sitting at the DIY we are going to be working on today, but let's take it back to the very beginning. From Lowe's I got 2 pieces of 4x4 by 8 feet and 2 pieces of 2x4 by 8 feet. I start by measuring and marking the 4x4 posts, and looking back on this now, I definitely could have used a second pair of hands. Even though the posts are manageable once they're cut, the original 4x4 is 8 feet long and is very heavy. So my 4x4 post or table legs I cut down to 35 inches so that with the additional 1 inch thickness of the butcher block on top, I'd have a 36-inch table height that will be the same height as the counters. I then cut my 2x4s, and I needed 3 pieces at 40.5 inches long and 4 pieces at 12.5 inches long. Next, I drilled pocket holes on both ends into all of my 2x4 pieces because that is how I plan to attach them to the 4x4 posts. After all of my pocket holes were drilled, I moved on to sanding all the pieces until they were smooth to the touch. Once all of the sanding was done, I assembled the short sides of the table base just because I felt like it would be easier to maneuver that way and easier to paint versus having to flip each individual piece over multiple times to prime and paint and seal. So I assembled the shorter sides together. Also, I knew that I wouldn't have much trouble moving the shorter sides inside of the house once they were done, and I could just attach the longer 2x4 pieces once they were in the house. So I screwed in the 12.5-inch 2x4s to the 4x4 pieces using pocket hole screws, also adding some wood glue in between. For the placement of the shorter 2x4 pieces, I put them at 1/4 inch in from the edge and placed the top piece flush to the top of the 4x4s And for the lower piece, I placed it about 6 inches from the bottom of the 4x4s. After the sides were fully assembled, I then added some wood filler to any of the larger holes or knots that I saw in the wood so that it wouldn't be visible once I started to paint. Once the wood filler was dry, I put on 1 coat of primer and let that dry, and then sanded that down before I put on the first coat of paint. For the paint color, I used Rust-Oleum Protective Enamel in the color Flat White, just to keep it cohesive with the cabinets, which were already white, and since we are adding in a butcher block top, that will be a different color from the actual countertops. So I felt like having the base of the table be white as well would tie in with the rest of the kitchen. For the sealer, I used Minwax Polycrylic Water-Based Crystal Clear Top Coat. So I did some research and found out that using a water-based sealer is probably the most effective way to keep white paint from yellowing, but it does take a little more effort in the fact that you need to sand in between coats, and you need at least 3 coats to completely seal the entire thing off. Now that we're inside, it's time to put the entire table base together. So I started with the shorter sides flipped upside down so that I could put both of the longer 2x4 pieces in. Now I didn't have clamps that were long enough for the entire width of the 48-inch table, so I just made sure the 2x4 piece was level and then used a speed square to make sure all of my corners were at a 90-degree angle. For the final 2x4 piece, I clamped on some scrap pieces of wood to the 4x4 posts so that they could act as braces to hold up that 2x4 piece so that I could just screw in my pocket hole screws without having to worry about holding the 2x4 up. Once the first side was completely screwed in, I just double checked my level and made sure that the other side would be nice and square as well. Once the entire base was assembled, I noticed that there were a few spots that needed to be touched up with some paint. So after I did the touch-ups, I let that dry and sanded everything down and did one final coat of sealer so that everything would be nice and solid. I also added sealer to the top portion of the base, even though this will never be seen because the butcher block is going to be on top of it. I just wanted to add the sealer on here just to be safe. All of my sanding between coats happened off camera, just so you know. I did one coat of primer, let that dry, sanded that down, did 2 coats of the flat white, let that dry, then 1 coat of sealer, let that dry, sanded that down, the second coat of sealer, let that dry, sanded that down, and then took the piece inside to put on the final coat of sealer. Now that the final coat of sealer is dry, it's time to attach the base to the butcher block top. This butcher block came from Lowe's. It's actually a quick bench kit and it comes with brackets that can be attached to a wall and collapse and can have the butcher block fold down. It was pretty affordable for a piece of butcher block considering the prices for butcher block on their own. I knew it would be perfect for a kitchen island in a smaller space because the dimensions are 20 inches wide by 48 inches long. So that's when I decided to just make my own base for this. Now this is going in a kitchen that has a much smaller footprint, and I felt like it would be the perfect size for an island in a kitchen that is this small. After positioning the base onto the butcher block, I measured a 1/4 inch from each side of the 4x4 posts so that I could have a 1/4 inch overhang all the way around. Off camera, I ended up drilling some pocket holes into both sides of the inner corners of the 4x4 posts so that I could attach the butcher block to the base that way. Once the top was secured on, I added these felt pads to protect the floors. I picked these up from Amazon. They are 4 inches by 6 inches. I just lined it up on top of one of the corners of the 4x4 posts, traced out the other edges, and cut out 4 individual pieces. I then removed the backing and stuck on one in each corner. And with the felt pads added to all 4 corners, it's now time to flip the table over and we are pretty much done. The bar stools I'm adding here are from IKEA. They are the Franklin bar stools. They're super affordable and pretty good quality in my opinion, and they match perfectly with the color scheme in the kitchen with the black hardware, so I thought they would be the perfect addition to this island. And with the bar stools added, here is the finished butcher block top kitchen island.